Hey guys, it's Scott Payne from PM Master Prep, and in this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the monitoring and controlling process group. More specifically, I'm going to teach you how to ace 25% of the entire PMP exam. That's right, 1/4 of the PMP questions come from this one process group, monitoring and controlling. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to start with why. We always start with why. I always start with why, because why is the foundational thing we need to understand with all these processes and all these process groups. So I'm going to define the 3 key whys that are driving all the work in the monitoring and controlling process group. You've got to understand that. It's really going to help you understand why everything is driving from this process group. So we're going to start with why, and then I'm going to go into understanding what is actually accomplished in the process group. So if we understand why, what is pushing us in this process group, we understand what we actually accomplish, we're getting the foundation that we need to answer these questions. And lastly, I'm going to simplify how the work is completed in the monitoring and controlling process group. Now, there are a lot of flows that you've got to know: how changes flow, how information flow, how deliverables flow. These are all flows that all go through the monitoring and control area. You've got to know these. These are central. And once you get a hold of them, once you really get a hold of them, it's going to help you on the exam. That is what you need. So focus on those 3 big flows. Focus on the 3 whys. We're going to go through the what and the how. So without any more talking, let's jump into the details and get started. Hey guys, before we get too deep, let's cover the basics. Now, we're in the monitoring and controlling process group. These are all the processes here. Now, obviously, there are processes for every single knowledge area, so all 10 are covered, right? And it's a good spread. It's all the way across. Now, more specifically, there are 12 processes in the monitoring and controlling process group of the 49, right? So, of that, that's about 1/4, and there's 25% of the PMP questions come from this process group. So this is a very, very rich area to study. So 12 processes, 25% of your PMP questions. So this is really one of the areas that we really, really want to make sure that we know really well. And as we start to learn more about the monitoring and controlling process group, this whole process group is focused on determining a couple things. Basically, what is our performance against our baseline? We're going to talk about that a lot. What is our performance against a baseline? We set 3 baselines at the beginning. Now we start to look and say, hey, how are we doing? And then once we know how we're doing, we're saying, what are the sources of variation? This is a big one. Are we off? Are we ahead? Are we behind on our scope, costs, or schedule? And then what are the reasons why? And we want to understand those reasons why, and we're going to do that in each one of these processes, so that we can develop corrective actions that we must take in order to get us back to baseline, okay? So that's the whole purpose of this. What's our performance against baseline? What are the sources of variation? And what corrective actions are we going to take? And each one of these processes plays a role in determining those. So as we go deeper, I'm going to walk you through each individual process and how it plays in the game. So let's go deeper. All right, guys, now let's look at the 3 different whys. Now, the first why is to assess the project health. And we're going to look at this in 2 ways. I want you to think about this in 2 ways. The first thing is, think about all the activities that we said we were going to do in this process. All the methods and the approaches that we took. You're going to be assessing whether those methods are effective. Have they been as effective as we thought they'd be? Okay? And we're also going to look down across every single one of these knowledge areas below: scope, schedule, cost, etc., resource, communication. And we're going to say, how effective were those individual things across all those knowledge areas? Have they been effective? Have they been as impactful as we thought they would? And as we look through these lenses and we start to say, how are we in reference to our baselines, our 3 baselines, then we're going to say, do we may need to make adjustments, okay? And so as we start to learn there, we're going to try to return to baseline. Anytime we're off that baseline, that's the real why behind this. We want to stay on baseline. That's where we said, hey, if we do what we need to do and we hit our process and our plan, we're going to hit our project based on a certain day, a certain cost, a certain scope output. We got to assess ourselves as we go through the project against that baseline. If we're off the baseline, in a negative sense, then we're going to have to make some adjustments, right? And those come in the form of change requests. And we're going to talk about that in the perform integrated change control process. Very, very important. So anytime we're off our baseline, we're potentially going to put up a change request to adjust the way we're doing things so that we can be more effective. And we're going to do that iteratively all the time. We're going to talk you through that flow of change, okay? So we're always trying to return ourselves to baseline. That's one of the whys behind this. It's a very important one. And then as we're producing things and executing, we're producing deliverables. Here is where we evaluate them across two different functions. Do they meet the acceptance criteria that we established way early in the project? We're going to do that internally. And then does the customer actually accept them? So we're going to walk through the processes. There's two below: control quality and then validate scope, that evaluate these things. Do they meet acceptance criteria? Does the customer accept them? Okay. And that's going to evolve through there. And then those are going to be directed toward close project group and phase toward the last process group. So those are the three whys. How's our health? We need to understand our health. That why drives our actions. How are we doing versus baseline? We need to understand and return to baseline. We need to get back there so that we can hit our project on what we said we would. And then how are our deliverables doing? Do we have them accepted per the acceptance criteria, and are their customer there? So if we understand those three whys, everything below should be driving towards supporting those three whys. And let's see how that does. Okay, so now let's look through the objectives, all right? And so the objectives are what is done. What is done? Not why or how, but what is done. All right, so objective number one is all focused around our project progress and performance. More specifically, we're trying to track, review, and regulate our project progress and performance. Now, as you see on the left side, the knowledge areas, there's tons of control processes. Control scope, control schedule, control resources, and then some monitoring, communication, monitoring risk. Those are different ways to say, hey, we're going to assess what's happening right now, what we thought should be happening. That's basically against a baseline or an expectations. And then, do we need to return to baseline? What is happening? And the way in which we do that inside of each one of these processes is we take rough data, just basic facts about where we are right now, what's happening. We evaluate that against using analysis, different types of analysis techniques inside each process. And we say, how are we doing in reference to our baselines and our expectations? Okay. At any time as we go through the project. And as we do that analysis on the data, we produce information or insights. That's what we want to think through. Information equals insights, some kind of realization. Oh goodness, we are ahead or behind, or this is working and not working. Okay, and so think about all those processes that are evaluating, all those knowledge areas are all coming out. All that information is coming out. And occasionally it might generate a change request. Hey, we need to make actions on this. And the change request flows up to that perform integrated change control. So each one of those processes, there may be change requests that go up and flow into that where they're evaluated. And then if those change requests are approved, they go back to executing to inform the actual plan of the work that's going to get done and how the work's done, so we can modify it there. And then it comes back down and we assess, how did we do with the new change requests that were implemented and executing? And then that process continues to roll over. So we're taking that data in. What's the facts, ma'am? How are we doing? We're evaluating it and all these processes down below, how we're doing against our scope, cost, schedule, baselines, and then how we're doing as the effectiveness of our communication and, the procurement process and all these different things. We're using that to create information, knowledge, insights that we can either inform change requests or feed the back information in the form of information up to monitor and control project work, where this is, think about it, it's in the integration management knowledge area. So think about what you're doing. You have all these knowledge areas below, evaluating how you're doing across each of them. So just take, for example, cost management. You're going to use an EVM kind of analysis to see how we're doing. Same thing with schedule, how we're doing against the schedule, how our quality or resource management is doing. Here in integration management, we're integrating all that information. We're doing some analysis on it. How are we doing? What needs to change? Alternatives analysis to say, hey, we need to make these adjustments. What are there different options? We're doing all that analysis and we're outputting a report. Okay, that's the second output here. So we had the information coming from each of these process groups, or knowledge areas, and then the report comes out of the big monitoring and control project work. So that report is a summary and it'll come out frequently. You think about reports coming out in your project. They come out all the time, right? And it says, this is how we're doing, state of the union in a sense, right now. This is how we're doing. This is how we're projecting. Here's what the change requests we've put in. Here's the status of them, all these different things, just keeping people informed, right? A lot of that as well, as we look down below, the project schedule and cost forecast. So as you're creating this report based off information that you've gleaned from the cost and the schedule and all these different things, you're going to have forecasts. We are beating schedule, we're beating costs, we're doing great. Or the contrary, we're doing opposites, and this is what we're taking action. And so think about this report as it goes out. How would this be used? How is it used in your world, right? It's used to inform our stakeholders, inform our team, keep everybody in the loop in the way in which they need to be, so that they can assess what needs to change. They can help provide insights. They can provide assistance. They can just be kept aware so that they're not caught off guard. That helps a lot with, how many times have you gone through a project and someone has made a big issue just because they weren't kept informed? Having this report and feeding it out is key to keeping them informed. And that goes through communication management, stakeholder management down below. So, number one objective, project progress and performance. How are we doing versus our baseline? Let's track it, review it, get it out there, put in change requests, right? And then, like I just said, with change requests, we want to identify the areas where change to the plan is required, right? We're always looking, we're saying, how are we doing versus the baseline? That is why we're here, monitoring and controlling. And in those situations where we do have issues, where we can get better and we've identified them, let's put in a change request. And let's remember, change requests are submitted and they go to this process, 4.6. Just think, this thing flows up to 4.6, perform integrated change control. You might have a change control board or somebody evaluating them, and they're looking at the submitted change requests, and they're either approving or denying. The approved ones go back to executing, change the way we're doing the work, and then they go back and we're evaluating the success of these change requests. So that flow, so we're always getting change requests to go back. There's going to be a ton of change request questions on your PMP exam, tons of change requests. Now, the way I think with PMP change requests is I'm going to lean toward a very aggressive, in the sense of proactive and engaged, integrated management. You want to, if you have something out there that's of issue, you don't want to let it sit. Oh, we'll figure it out later. No, you want to be engaged. Hey, man, probably put in a change request for this. Let's get it evaluated. Let's get, some people thinking about how to solve this problem, and let's evaluate and test our process. So we want to be engaged, proactive, positive, and always using change requests. Lots of change request questions on the PMP exam. So that's a big, big objective here. And the last one is when we get into, we want to objectively evaluate and formally accept our project deliverables. All right. So I'm going to explain something here. It's the flow of deliverables. All right. So think about in executing, we said we're producing deliverables. That's what we're there for, right? Absolutely. So think about to the left of here, that process group is producing deliverables, tons of them. So what do we need to do next? We got to see if they meet the acceptance criteria that we established earlier in the process, in the project. Do they meet the acceptance criteria? And normally as we think through and we teach these processes, we go top to bottom. That's just the easy, nice, flowing way we do it. But in this one, it's going to go bottom up. Okay, so what we want to do when we get these deliverables in, they're going to go into control quality. All right, 8.3 control quality. Deliverable comes in, and we'll go through this in depth later in the individual process. But we go into control quality, that deliverable comes in there, and we evaluate it. To be simple about it, we evaluate it. Does it meet the acceptance criteria that we established? Does it? That's an internal review. Does it meet it? If it does, then it's a verified deliverable. First thing down there, verified deliverable, meets the acceptance criteria. Great. All right, next thing it does is that verified deliverable term you need to know. So it goes deliverable to verified deliverable through the control quality process. Then it flows up boop, 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 to validate scope. So it's going against, it feels like it's going against the current, like a salmon going against the current. But it's, anytime like a salmon's going against the current, it's producing something good. It's making offspring. It's getting the more salmon to come. So it's very important that we go against the current here in the form of flow there. So we go from control quality to validate scope. And then that verified deliverable gets evaluated by the customer. Does the customer accept it? That's a pretty big one, right? They didn't take it yet. They're going to do that in the closing. They didn't take it away. We haven't handed it over, but we're just saying, hey, take a look at it. We work it with them. We do a review. Do you accept this deliverable? And they say yes, or they say no. And then you start talking about, hey, how can we get this accepted? What do we have to do different? Obviously, change request. But once they accept it, then that's an accepted deliverable. So it goes deliverable, verified deliverable to accepted deliverable, and that happens in the validate scope. So if you see that flow go through, that's a key flow. A lot of people need to know that. So if we think through this, you need to know that flow of deliverables, and we go back up there. In doing that, those are the 3 key objectives. Let's just take a second to review. All right, so number 1, as we go through this, we're producing a lot. We're working our project. We want to evaluate how we're doing against our baselines, right? How we're doing against a baseline, and how effective are our actual activities and the things that we said, actually, how effective are they? A lot of times we're going to say they're not as effective, or we're behind baseline or something. And then we're going to get, through that analysis, we're going to get work performance information out of all these processes, all the way top to bottom knowledge areas. We're going to get information out. It's going to flow up, and it's going to give us change requests. Hey, we need change requests to get us back to baseline. Really, really important. Back to baseline. And then the thing is that information is going to flow up to 4.5, monitor and control project work. That's where the information gets integrated, put together, evaluated. The bigger picture is going to be evaluated. And we're going to say, here's how we're doing. Here's our schedule. Here's our forecast. Here's what we need to do. Let's communicate out. Let's, say the status of our change request, all that stuff. And then out of that comes the reports. That report is distributed at a nice methodical rate to the right people, maintaining communication, engagement. That's how this all flows together. You see how this is like a system? This is like an integrated system, everything working together. It's all iterative. This is not just come from the top down to the bottom. No, it's all iterative. It works together. So that's what you have to understand, how these things all flow together. Because on the exam, you're going to get questions that say, you're here, the customer doesn't accept a deliverable. Oh no, we already said it was an accepted deliverable. How does it get to, or a verified deliverable, how does it get to accepted deliverable? The only way it goes from verified deliverable to accepted deliverable is if the customer says thumbs up. So what happens when that doesn't happen? You're going to have questions like that. Change requests, adjustments, those kind of things. So you got to see this thing as a system. You know where the change requests go. You know where they flow back. And you know how that stuff goes. And then the last and most important objective after we said about change requests, the third one is to objectively evaluate and formally accept our project deliverables. That is why we're here. That is what we're doing. And this project helps us get there. And once we do that, we know that's 25% of our questions on the PMP exam. So we understand that flow, how it goes. See that flow as data goes into these processes. Information comes out, either change requests or information flows up. You see how that goes. The report comes out. Change requests go into perform integrated change control. That goes back to change the executing process group. And then it comes back. So it all flows together. See it as a beautiful symphony working, okay? And then also those deliverables, how they go from control quality up to validate scope, and then they bump over to close. That's a beautiful little loop right there in itself. So this was a high level. Now we go deep. Now we go deep into each box and each process. It's going to be beautiful. As you go through this and think about what we're doing, we're going why, what, and how. We're going methodically through there. Then we go into understanding this process group. Then we go into the detailed boxes. Then we go into the processes. Then we ask you questions about them. It's just-in-time learning. It's progressively building your skills. And the number one thing is we have a community here. You have me, both in this computer form and then online in the book form. If you haven't read my book, you got to get into it. And then you got the Facebook group. You got everything there. You got to go on there and you got to engage the community. So we are, 4/5 of the way done. This is the last big chunk of this middle 80% of questions. You've got to engage. You got to keep pushing through. You can do this. This is a beautiful process group. I love the way it flows around. I'm a systems guy. I love the way it flows around. So once you get in, you understand that, you're going to love it too. Understand the information, how the reports flow, change requests, verified deliverables, all these things, how it all works. That's what's going to save you on the exam. It's not going to save you exam. It makes you a better project manager. Let's get to it. That's what you're trying to do here. And then you're going to be really successful in the PMP exam. So what are we doing now? We're jumping into That box right there, you're going to see me talk to you about that first integration management and monitoring controlling box. I'm going to talk to you about monitoring control project work and perform integrated change control. Those are big ones. Big ones. Lots of questions on those. Okay. Then we're going to go through there. We're going to see the John story. If you're following the John story through here, you're learning a lot by looking at what he's doing. Okay. You should have questions. What would I have done in that spot? Big learning there. And then the last thing is you're going to take a focus quiz on the back end of that and take those questions. Really assess what you're doing. Write your missing down. Go to the PM1 view, the ITO inspector, all the videos, my book, everything. Call me on the phone if you want to. You're going to go through and learn, and you got to methodically go through there. So I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to see you on the next side. I'm going to see you in the monitoring control project work. Let's get to work. Keep rolling. You can do this.